Good morning, everyone. Jim Clark here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary to share another contemplative focus with you today. And the focus that I really want to share with you today is the reality of the other, the greatest story ever told. Now, we tell ourselves stories all the time, and as meditators, if you're a meditator watching this, you know that that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with stories about yourself that you need to replace with something more truthful, more spiritual, if you will. So, the reality of the other, the greatest story ever told. Our human experience is one of being an individual person living with and among other individuals. You, me, and the space between. Although we take this for granted as a normal experience, the truth is this experience is a illusion. It's very real to most of us, but throughout the ages there are masters of the human experience that have always said the same thing throughout the ages. The ultimate truth of our experience is that separation is a very strong illusion. We are here to experience this illusion and to break free from it. And meditation is the balancing technique that masters have always used to this end. So, when I first came here to Synchronicity, I know that I was meditating before I came here, but the focus on meditate was so strong here compared to what I was doing out in the world when I was trying to make a living and being involved in the world in that sense, and to meditate. Meditation was something I had to squeeze in here and there. But living here, we did it at least once a day, but most days it was like anywhere from once to 3 times a day. And the reason for this was because that was the balancing technique. And of course, the balance that we're talking about here is the balance between the subjective polarity, which is the positive polarity, which is the polarity that allows you to experience unity consciousness, and the objective polarity, which is the world around us. You are in the objective polarity to me, and I am in the objective polarity to you. And to break through that, we use meditation, because what do you do when you meditate? You go into yourself, you go into your subjective polarity, and you give it more and more power by doing so. It's simply because we pay attention. What we pay attention to, we become. And if we're constantly focused on the outside world, to the other or others, then that's what we're going to get back, because we're investing all of our power in that. And what we choose to invest in, we get. And what most people don't realize is that it's such a simple resolution to the problem of the fear-based experience of the other, and yet it demands a lot from an individual to break free from it. You have to be very committed, you have to be very focused on balance, and that includes balance in all of our dimensions, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So when I first came here, it was challenging. The first couple of years here were very challenging for me, because it demanded that I maintain that focus and not to break it, which I did. But it was the kind of environment where stories that were not true would surface for you in a way that caused you some upheaval, a lot of times emotional upheaval, because your definitions, what you've been attracted to, what you have taken on as your identity, has negative components to it, like I can't do this, or I'm not worthy of this, or this is too hard, or that life I had out there was so much better, it was so much more relaxed, and it was more pleasant. But was it really? If it was, why did you come here? So you're dealing with your stories, your stories, all the stories you have accumulated that define who you are. And if those stories are not in alignment with the experiences you have when you're meditating, which takes you out of that, even if it's just briefly, um, then they must come to the surface to be relinquished, you have to let go of them by replacing that with the kind of truthful experience you had in your meditation. So to this end, it was a process, and that's a perfect name for it, because we were processing our own illusory data like crazy. When you're in this experience, when you're in the energy of a living master, you don't have much choice, because that energy is saying is telling you who you really are, even when you're not in sitting meditation. So it's always here, and it's always pushing you to that truth of who you are. And so there's a lot to do, and whenever I had to come up against something that was holding me back, fortunately with our teacher here, he was so illumined that he could see what was happening, and he would ask that you address it. Now, if that meant going to a doctor, then you go to a doctor. If it meant taking a medication, you take a medication. Whatever was required, as long as you did what you had to do, that was fine. It was just part of the process. But if you decided that you were going to hold on to some data that you didn't want to take pills, or you didn't want Western medicine, etc., then that was the end of your stay, because you were breaking away from what this place is all about. And that's breaking free from the illusion, or helping you to get there as much as this kind of a place can do for you. And it's still like that here. I mean, it's not, we don't have Master Charles here to help guide us and to share his perspective with us. But we do have all the years of our experience. We do have where we are now. And we're all in different places along that path of ultimately breaking free from that illusion. It takes many lifetimes to do that. And lifetimes like this are so precious, because you go further in that direction when you're putting yourself through all this process than you could do in many, 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 many lifetimes, just kind of poking away at it on your own, which is what I experienced here too, because I was meditating before I came here, and I thought I was doing fairly well as a meditator. I used many systems before I even started this system of meditation. But once I did start with Synchronicity's meditation soundtracks, I immediately knew that that's what I really wanted, because the impact was so much better and so much more consistent than any other technique that I tried to use. And this is also the gift from our teacher, because he developed this technology while he was still in India with his teacher. He would go into, he knew a lot about music. He knew the music theory and how it worked. And with that knowledge, he went, and the brainwaves as well, how they respond to various frequencies in the music. He would go into the caves where yogis had meditated for years and years, centuries. And he realized when he was in those caves that they had this echoing effect in there, and it created a space where their mantras, because they would be repeating mantras vocally while that was their form of meditation. And that vocalization would echo off the walls in such a way that it kind of reinforced itself, over and over and over again. So he took that observation, and then he converted it to a brainwave entrainment technology that's embedded in all of our soundtracks. And that entrainment technology is created at various levels of meditation, which is how we have the alpha, the theta, and the delta levels of meditation in all our soundtracks. That was a gift that he gave us, because when we sat to meditate, if you were processing, if you thought you weren't meditating, if you felt like you were just constantly being distracted by your battle with your own stories, that's not true. You were meditating, and you were bringing all that up to the surface to be released. So to the end of releasing those stories, whether they come up with powerful negative emotions, or if your body was jerking around with energy surges and so forth, or if it was just mental thinking going on and on because you couldn't stop your mind, which is what most people think of when they meditate. If my mind's thinking, I'm not meditating. But this is not true, because if you're meditating, you're going in towards your subjective polarity, which is the non-dominant polarity by default in our human experience. By default, when we're born into this world, all of our experience is limited to the exterior world, to the objective world, to that world that is separate from us. So the experience of the story of separation is where all our power is going. We don't realize that that's what we're doing because we're so identified with it and who we are in that role, in that play. And because of that identity, which we protect, because we think it's me, and so forth and so on, then we're holding on to that illusion. When we start to meditate, when we have lived enough lifetimes that we start to say, okay, I think I've had enough of this kind of experience, then the motivation to meditate comes into being for us. This is automatically, this is part of the play of consciousness that we are part of, because we are consciousness. Ultimately, that's our ultimate truth. And in that truth, when we're ready as individuals to start the journey of breaking free from this strong illusion, then we start to meditate. Teachers show up in our lives, people show up in our lives that are also doing this, and so forth and so on. So the momentum gradually starts to move us towards the interior of our own being so that we can give that more power. And that's what you're doing when you meditate. You're giving power to the positive polarity of your human experience. And the more you do it, the more power you're going to create. But this is also where the challenges are, because the more you meditate, the deeper you go, the more your stuff, what we call your stuff, your stories, your illusions about who you are and what life is, comes to the surface. And it's usually negative because most people's databases are very negative, and we bring some of that with us when we're born into these lives because we have created so much negativity in the lives before this one. And so we're working with what we have now. We're working with some data that we brought with us at birth, and then whatever we've developed in this lifetime, what we've become identified. Our self-worth is one of the bottom lines always. Are we worthy? Are we worse than, better than, equal to, and so forth and so on, in relation to the others? That comparative, ongoing, never-ending judgment that we create for ourselves is based on that experience of the other, which is why we call it the greatest story ever told, because it's one that has locked us in for lifetimes after lifetimes. But to break free from it, which is what we're here to do, we start to meditate. And then when we start to meditate, we stay with meditation. It becomes a part of our life that we don't let go of. And to this end, let's say, for my own self, I know that meditation, living here, meditation is an automatic, it's part of our schedule, so I don't have to think about it, it's just going to happen, and it still does. And so, and I'm very blessed to be in a situation like that, because I'm not living where I might be distracted to start running off into other illusions that might be pleasurable to the mind. So I continue my process here, and believe me, it's still going on. So I know that I'm going to journey as much as I possibly can in this lifetime, and that's a lifetime that is gold in terms of that cycle of involution, where you're still building your stories about yourself being separate, and to the end of breaking away from that story about yourself and who you are as separate. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. The reality of the other, the greatest story ever told. We're still dealing with that, aren't we? So I'm glad that you were here today, and I thank you for watching. And it might be, we have a program coming up this next week, so it'll be probably 2 to 3 weeks before I'll have a chance to be on the air again here. So until then, and we'll announce that, of course, on our Facebook page. So stay tuned. I'll be back again. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.